Yes, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Andrew Foss. And Andrew is the co-founder and founding president of the BAVA, British Association of Vedic Astrology. He's also editor of the BAVA journal Gochara and is a certified Jyotish Pandit and Jaimini scholar. The highest professional certifications in Vedic astrology involving about a decade of intensive study. Andrew also has a PhD in computing science and is also an Oxford physics graduate with publications in Nature and other leading scientific journals. Andrew Foss has developed the unique, easy, and powerful software that is called Shri Jyoti Star, and Shri Jyoti Star has become the very first choice amongst Vedic astrologers around the world. Also, Andrew is the author of the acclaimed book and ebook series Yoga of the Planets. He enjoys a deep love of music, art, and poetry and has more than 30 years' experience studying and teaching the Vedic wisdom around the world. And today, Andrew will be speaking on a very interesting and exciting topic, how to overcome loneliness for greater well-being. So please give Andrew a very warm welcome. Over to you, Andrew, please.
Thank you very much. Very fabulous introduction. Om Gurave Nama. Om Gurave Nama. Om Gurave Nama. Om Ganganapataye Nama. Aim Saraswatyay Nama. So, Sonal, I'm very grateful to you for organizing this conference, and you picked a good topic, this overcoming or greater wellness, well-being for people, because let's face it, it's badly needed. And, we know this is an eclipse year. Last year was also an eclipse year. So there's a certain amount of distress and loneliness. I picked loneliness because it really is the kind of epidemic at this stage. Let's see what we can do. It's a very serious and important topic. And actually, there is something exciting inside of what we can do about it. So let's see. We'll get to this interesting picture towards the end. Here we go. Just a small advert for this is the software that was mentioned in the introduction. Shri Jyoti Star. The latest version is 10. And this is available from the Microsoft Store. We're hoping to have a version available from the Apple Store soon, and Android as well. So this is
Yes, Andrew, I'm sorry to interject. I'd like to request you to provide some payment options for your fans from Russia.
Yeah, I mean, this will get sorted out eventually.
Okay, yes, thank you
We're
very
we're
much.
we're, we're moving to a new phase with it, which will have more options. So
Okay, yes, thank you.
we're working on it. Everything takes, it's not a small amount of work, it's a lot, but it's
Yes, of
coming
course,
along.
thank you.
Yeah. So, and the good thing about this is that you pay a little bit every month and you keep getting the latest version. And we're adding cool and exciting stuff all the time. This is my book, Yoga of the Planets. This is kind of unique in a sense because the core of it are these mantras which have been used by the Vedic pundits for hundreds of years for remedy, and they're very effective. But this is the first time it's been presented in some digestible format with the lists nicely edited and translation and commentary, and also explains how you can select mantras for your chart easily. It's easy. And these mantras are very precise. Like there's a mantra for every Navamsha in the chart for each planet. So it's very well targeted. Just mention that in September we have the next international conference of the British Association for Vedic Astrology. You can find all about it at bava.org. It's starting on the 4th of September in London. So we're going to have 4 days in London with Pandit Sanjay Rath and many other good speakers. And then it'll continue online for the next 2 weekends after that. Good. So we're going to cover the whole question of this loneliness epidemic. I mean, very briefly. First, we have to try and understand what is happiness. I mean, this is the crucial question. So we'll look briefly at the research that's been done and what is really going on. And then we'll look at some of the chemistry that's behind it all, like the dopamine and oxytocin and so forth. And this will get us somewhere towards the roots of the problem. And then we'll look at it from a Jyotish perspective and try to understand the different, origins of the suffering that people experience, especially with the moon and different malefics affecting the lagna and so forth. And we'll also look, it's very interesting, at what can be done by just simply moving to a different location. It does actually have quite a significant effect. So that's one remedy, It's not the ultimate remedy, but it's interesting to see how it works. So research on happiness. I mean, loneliness and poor well-being would disappear if we were happy, wouldn't it? So if you ask people what happiness means to them, this is research that's been done by scientists. And so it's very general in the sense that they're not looking into things like meditation. They're just asking people. And if you ask the students at university, they all say, oh, we have to have a lot of money. And then they might say something about relationships. But if you ask people who are a bit older, all they talk about is relationships. The story of money has disappeared, and that's good. Though it doesn't necessarily mean that we fully understood that money is not the answer. I was just thinking there's this sort of concept of if you want to get a donkey to move, you hang a carrot in front of its face. And it knows the carrot will taste sweet, so it starts walking forwards. But of course, the thing is attached to its head. So as it walks forwards, the carrot keeps also moving further away. So it never actually gets to the carrot. And we all think, hey, the donkey is stupid, right? But then this is exactly what advertising has done to us. We're told that if we have more stuff, we'll be happy. And to get more stuff, we need more money. So we invest vast amounts of time and energy trying to have more money and more stuff. And yet the sweet taste keeps on moving as far. It's always ahead of us and it's never tasted. Isn't it true? And you look at the lives of the billionaires, they're the most screwed up people. It may be well hidden, but you don't have to look very deep to understand that. So it's something else, absolutely something else. We shouldn't just become a donkey. But definitely there's something about relationships. And then, when I was a lot younger and I did quite a bit of traveling in rural Africa and India, I noticed that the people, and also even in Europe, the people in the poor regions looked happy. They were happy. If you were hungry, they fed you, all that. They might not have had much, but it didn't seem to bother them. Then you go to, you get on the tube in London or something, and everyone. So what's the problem? You see, the more stuff you have, does it make you miserable? No, it's not really that. There was a great interview of Narendra Modi, the PM of India, by that great guy, Lex Friedman. And the Prime Minister was explaining that he grew up in a house that consisted of a single room. He and his whole family, there was quite a few of them, all lived in this one room. And he said they were, I guess by definition, poor, but they never thought of themselves as poor. So they didn't suffer from poverty. They just got on with their lives. So, it's all going on in our head somehow based on our concepts that we've been, in a sense, indoctrinated into. But there is some kind of something going on here, because people who live traditionally in the nature or more in connection with nature and who aren't struggling for the next, they have enough food and they haven't yet realized that they desperately need, Mercedes private plane and all that. There's a certain joy, that natural joy in life. And so anyway, let's look more into this. Now, a lot of people, I know, I'm from England, and we know how much people like their alcohol. Is that the answer? Why do we anyway resort to that? We have to think about it. This is not a morality lecture or anything. We're just trying to understand what goes on with our brain chemistry. So the first thing I wanted to look at is oxytocin. Now, this is this is a hormone, and it's also a neurotransmitter. It's involved in transmitting signals in the brain. It's produced in the hypothalamus. Now, sort of in the middle here, somewhere just back here, there's the hypothalamus and the pituitary. And these are famous. We don't fully understand them, but we know they're involved in many important functions. And they secrete certain things, have a very strong effect on us. People often think of the pituitary gland as the third eye. It has some connection to that. So we don't know fully the whole story, but anyway, oxytocin plays a crucial role in reproduction. Without it, we will not be born. It helps with breastfeeding and all that. But it's also critical to social bonding, including romantic attachment and the bonding between a mother and a child. So oxytocin is often called the love hormone because it's associated with social bonding, trust, and attachment. So when people say relationships are the thing that's really given them happiness, this is really what they're talking about. The closeness to other people tends to raise the oxytocin level, and it feels good. And that's good. It is good. There's nothing wrong with this. It's actually wonderful. And it's both bonding between pairs, those kinds of close connections. This is not about sex. This is just a closeness thing. And it happens with any, you don't have to have a close relationship with someone. If you have any little bit of a pleasant relationship with someone, there's some effect. And if you look at animals, virtually all animals, whether it's monkeys, primates, whales, dolphins, even tigers and lions and so forth, you see there's a tremendous amount of physical touching. They rub up against each other and they groom each other, at least the monkeys and the primates do. And I mean, this must generate a lot of oxytocin and make for a pleasant life. And I guess if you go to France, there is quite a lot of touching, right? Hugging and all that. But we in England, they sort of look down on this. We think, we've been affected by the Protestant ethos, I guess. But there's a sort of resistance. So, even in a close, intimate relationship, after a few years, there's relatively, not in every couple, but there's a tendency for, the physical connection to decrease. And so we suffer, don't we, because of the lack of this. I mean, it's just a chemical in the brain, but it does wonderful things for us. So it's good to have some understanding. So these are some of the other aspects: mother-infant bonding, very critical, and social recognition. So our ability to interact appropriately with people. I mean, there are certain mental health issues which arise when the thing isn't working properly. Like, somebody's giving us a clear clue of how they're feeling, but we don't recognize it. I think that's called Asperger's. It's one part of Asperger's. Asperger's seems to be a broad spectrum type of thing. Then there's anxiety and stress. So it tends to reduce it. I mean, that's what part of why we like the, positive relationships, because it does help us, you see. So this is an important consideration. Now, dopamine is another important, very important chemical. It's a neurotransmitter, and it also functions as a hormone, and it affects various bodily processes. But the main thing is that it's a kind of reward. You know, if we do what our brain wants us to do, it gives us a little reward, which is some kind of positive feeling. And in fact, this is the basis of the whole AI. Large language models are trained because they're designed in such a way that if it goes in the right direction, it's given a reward. It's programmed to understand that this is a reward, and it's programmed to move towards rewards. And so this is how it's called reinforcement learning. It's a fundamental part of training machines. And then, I mean, this is basic to so many things, this idea of a reward. But the difficulty is that what it does is it gives you this little hit, and then you want more. If you get a reward, you want more, isn't it? And that's a little dangerous, because then you can get kind of hooked on whatever it was that gave you the hit. This is the biggest problem about it. So it's essential for life, but it has its questionable side. So it's the key part of the brain's reward system, and it motivates us to look for pleasure. And then it plays a crucial role in coordination and regulating movement, in learning and memory processes. It helps us associate actions with rewards. If you look at it, our behavior has been trained, and it's trained with a process of, well, of course, there's the snake, there's the stick and the carrot. But beating people is not a very effective way of training them. It's a very bad, it may be necessary in some rare circumstances, but the reward function is much more effective, because if someone gets a reward, they tend to be more likely to repeat that behavior, right? And it regulates our feelings of pleasure, happiness, and well-being. Now, there are possible imbalances that are caused by dopamine, and that could be due to a deficiency or a deficiency, and there's dopamine excess. If the dopamine is in a deficiency, we can get some serious problems like Parkinson's, depression, and increased risk of addiction. So this is a very critical point. There's a sort of normal kind of level, and if we go below that, then various, firstly, mental health problems start, like depression. And in an attempt to get out of this hole, there's a risk of addiction. Addiction is really, I guess, an attempt to fix the problem, isn't it? I mean, you see, the thing about loneliness, according to the former Surgeon General of the United States, something like 50% of the population suffers from loneliness. That's why I picked it, But loneliness is serious because it's the incubator for depression. If you're lonely for long enough, you'll start to become depressed. And then all the other mental health problems become more and more likely. So it's a slippery slope. So this is, part of this is a shortage of, or a little low level of dopamine. But the question is, certain things will give us a dopamine hit, but it doesn't last very long. So is that the solution? You see, this is the question we have to ask ourselves, because some of us, if not all of us, go looking for these dopamine hits. It says when you're scrolling on your, portable device, it's really, you're seeking a little dopamine hit, isn't it? Just as you get from, ingesting certain things. Now, if you get an excess of dopamine, for example, some drug or certain activities give us a boost, but it can get to become excessive, and that can lead to addiction or compulsive behaviors. This is a well-known mental health problem. And, the first sip of alcohol gives you a little high, as there's a little bit of dopamine released. So you think, if I take another sip, I'll get some more. But it doesn't work like that with alcohol. Alcohol only gives you a little bit at the beginning. And after that, it's just toxicity, really. But because of the way we're trained, one keeps on trying, isn't it? Whatever it is, alcohol or anything else, if it gives us a hit in the beginning, we keep on trying and trying. It's like gambling, you know. The gambling industry is extremely scientific. They have studied, or at least the psychologists they employ have studied how to control and manipulate human beings. And they know exactly what to do. So it typically happens that, say, you go to a casino, in the first few minutes, you'll be given a small reward, like you win something and you think, oh, this is my lucky day. But of course, after a while, it's all the money is gone. So in fact, the only way, probably reliable way of making any money in a casino is when they give you the first payout, you just take it and go. So I came across a guy. He was this smart. It's not easy to just take it and go because the temptation to keep going is rather strong. Anyway, he'd figured it out. So he went to one casino. He put some money down. They gave him more money back. He took it and left. He drove up the road to the next casino, did it again, collected another $1,000, drove up the road to the third casino. And at the third casino, there was a guy on the door who said, "You're not coming in." He'd been blacklisted from all the casinos in that, part of the States because he'd figured out a way of actually taking some money out of their pocket. So, they're not stupid. Anyway, the thing is, this is it's the hooking. You see, it's a hook. So having some understanding of this, I think, is helpful. I mean, what else can we do? Because it's part of the natural functioning and nothing wrong, but we should understand, especially if we have Rahu anywhere associated with the fifth house, because the fifth house is really how the mind functions. There's the moon, of course, and the fourth house and things, but the fifth house, because it's the second from the fourth particularly, has a lot to say about the direction our mind follows. So if Rahu is influencing it, there's a tendency to get caught up in some kind of gambling. I've had too many clients like that. I mean, people who are trying to make a living out of gambling. I mean, there is maybe a short phase where they're ahead, but most of it is a disaster. So we should be careful. What can we do to increase dopamine? Well, any activity that brings joy, there's positive activities, not just ingesting things. Spending time in nature. I don't know if you noticed. I guess everyone must have had some experience of this. But when you're in unspoiled nature, there's an extraordinary sense of joy that tends to develop, and it's for no obvious reason, but it's just something about, the way nature is designed. Unfortunately, we've suppressed nature heavily, and you have to go quite out of your way to really get a full dose. In a beautiful city like London, there are some very lovely parks, but, other than that, one has to drive quite a way out of town. So that is really one of the number one things. Then meditation can help a lot. Exercising is very good. There's a thing called runner's high. We'll look at that in a minute. So some people run because they get a bit of a hit out of it, but regular exercise is very important, essential, really. Music does it to us. There are lots of things. And in reasonable doses, it's all good, right? So these are the other things that probably are relevant here, endorphins and serotonin. So endorphins create feelings of well-being. Moderate exercise, meditation, music, ultraviolet light, You know this thing that parts of the world where they don't get much sunshine in the winter, they have this SAD, sad uh, tendency. Actually, it's a very entertaining thing I noticed being reported the other day is that, the chat GPT is kind of absorbing the inputs that it gets from people, the prompts. And they discovered that during the winter time, Northern Hemisphere winter, the chat GPT was producing more sort of, mm, what should we say? What's the word? I mean, I won't say miserable, but there were kind of the tone of the responses was a little bit downbeat. And then when the summer came along, it went up again. So it's just reflecting the input that it's getting from people. And this is one of the main things that we have to think about with artificial intelligence, because the human brain, large language models, it's all the same. According to what you train it on, how you train it, what is the stuff that we're putting in the input, such is the output. When I was at university doing computing and, machine learning lab, I worked in the machine learning lab, and we had a big sign on the wall. It said garbage in, garbage out. And this is the truth. And this is exactly what, the recent upsurge of AI has shown us. If they're trained on rubbish, out comes rubbish. That is what, and, we're training ourselves all the time, isn't it? Because everything we expose ourselves to is absorbed. We don't really have a very effective filter. If you tell somebody a lie and you hold up a signboard saying this is a lie, and you repeat it a few times, they will start to believe it. And this is the whole basis of modern politics, isn't it? At the time of Brexit, the guy who claimed he was running the Brexit campaign, or at least advising them, he said it doesn't have to be true, it just has to be believable. See, so this is the thing. I mean, the level of disinformation these days is just out of control. So we should be careful what we expose ourselves to. So low levels of serotonin are linked to depression. And it's also responsible for this runner's high, the positive feeling you can get from exercising. And this is also, sunlight is also good for this. Now, I was wondering about red meat because people who eat it, they're rather, they behave a little bit like they're addicted. I'm not passing any comment on anything, any kind of diet, but what it turns out is that high protein foods like meat suppress serotonin. Strangely enough, they actually suppress serotonin, and that leads to a certain craving for more. So it's perfect for the food industry because they get more sales, but it's not actually good for the consumer. Well, it turns out that vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, and these things actually increase serotonin. So that's something we could think about. We should also be aware that humans, and this is a very interesting factoid, that humans uniquely, really, in the animal kingdom, have this allergy to mammal products from mammals. And this allergy is in all of us, but usually it's a very low level thing. But certain things can trigger it. So it was sort of discovered because there was a particular cancer drug. It was a very effective drug, but people kept dying from an allergic reaction. And they discovered that it was because it turned on this allergy. And then exposure to meat or anything like that from mammals, this is mammals we're talking about, would make the person very sick and sometimes die. And in America, and this thing's spreading even in the US, UK and places, the ticks, there's ticks. You go out in beautiful nature, but there are ticks. And if you're not careful, you can get bitten. And some of them activate this allergic reaction. And after that, you can't eat meat. It's not safe. And there's some, in Virginia, where I used to be living, something like 20 to 25% of the population have this situation. And the medical field is only just beginning to understand this. So a lot of people were getting very sick without knowing why they were getting sick, and they weren't getting the diagnosis properly. I think this understanding about this thing is growing these days, but we should bear it in mind. And also includes, why people get sick with having dogs and cats around. I mean, we love them. They're great, and the oxytocin and all that. But sometimes this, the dander and all that can cause allergic reaction. So that's one of those things. Now, what has not been mentioned in the research, getting into something much more interesting, is the element of bliss. Now, because it's been hardly researched, we don't actually know, there must be some chemical involved. In India, we have this term, or in Sanskrit, ananda, right? Bliss. In English, we say bliss. And it's absolutely the most beautiful thing. There is actually a chemical called anandamide. This is one of the cannabinoids. It's produced in the body, but not in, not at low levels. But meditation has been shown to increase it quite considerably. So that's maybe something to do with it. I mean, it was called anandamide by the scientists because they thought it was associated with feelings of well-being. So there is a neurochemistry behind it, but this is not something that's produced by any particular behavior. It's not that you eat something, you drink something, you do something. None of these things are responsible. Bliss is something that comes up completely spontaneously with no obvious source. That's that's the problem because there's no button to push. But if you consistently do spiritual practices, it starts happening more and more. Some people are born quite close to that. So without doing anything, they have a certain amount of heightened joy in their lives, or maybe quite a lot of it. And maybe some people are born further down the spectrum and they're a bit miserable. But if the point here is that you can do something about it, if you have some serious spiritual practice, preferably not learned from a book or YouTube, but it's, you're actually trained by some fully competent guru, then progressively life becomes more and more joyful. And there are certain stages, you see. It starts off by a feeling of pleasantness. Now, if you feel pleasant, like I think I already said, loneliness is not an issue. If you keep on going, pleasantness tends to become joy. You keep going, joy turns into bliss. And a bit further down the road is ecstasy. So we can't quite live a full functional life in a permanent state of ecstasy, but a bit of ecstasy now and again is very delightful. But we do need, definitely we need joy or bliss in life. And it's once you reach the point where it starts appearing by itself, then you think this is easy. But there's been a lot of work to get to that stage, but it's absolutely worth it. This is my main point, I think. We want to experience joy in life, and we don't get joy from little hits of dopamine. This is a very important consideration. And, especially drug taking tends to push us away from the pleasantness of life. Life tends to become more unpleasant. This is the difficulty because each time you push the neurochemistry, there's a kind of reaction inside the system which drops the levels of the things that cause pleasantness. So in fact, it is one step forward and two steps back. And this is why once having the occasional whatever can turn into a real problem as time goes on, because you're more and more desperately trying to push the button that you think will bring you happiness. But if one goes in for some serious sadhana, then we can actually turn the whole situation around for ourselves. And then a little patience is required, but it has real benefits right from the beginning, especially yoga asanas. we've got the International Yoga Day, I think it's tomorrow. So this is a very good time to remember and do a bit of yoga. Because if you do yoga repeatedly or regularly, then it really does tune up the whole system. Especially you learn it properly, not just from a video. So the whole thing is a science. It's a science designed to clean the whole energetic system of the body. That improves our health, but it improves the health from a very deep level. And this makes our meditation more effective. Now, for a long time, I was a bit lazy. I thought meditation was enough. But, and I became slack about my yoga asanas. And the result was actually I made very little progress, you know. It was quite depressing, actually. But once I started doing the yoga again properly, then everything started working better and all that problem went away. So let's have a look at the thing from a Jyotish perspective. Now, first I want to look at it from a Vedic numerological perspective, because it's just to get an overview. You know, in Jyotish we have, or in the Vedic system, we have what we call the gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And it's said these are said to be the mental gunas. So they influence everything. Everything in the universe is subject to the sattva, rajas, and tamas. But it's more obvious on the mental level. And in this, what we call Vedic numerology, the planets are organized, the 9 planets are organized in a sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 9, based on the gunas. It's very interesting. You start with the 3 sattvic planets, that's the Sun, Moon, and Jupiter. And each one of them represents a certain type of behavior that can generate satisfaction. You will not get any satisfaction from the other guys, only these 3. And what do they mean? Sun means your selfless service. That is what the sun represents. You know, if there's any sense of what's in it for me, no satisfaction. You get something, but you don't get satisfaction. But you do something that's genuinely selfless, you feel wonderful. I mean, it's extraordinary that people aren't behaving like that all the time, because everybody experiences this. So why don't we do it? I don't know. The moon is the mother to the world, you know. The moon is the mother. So it means you know, a real mother is someone who is concerned that everybody is eaten, not just my kid, but every kid should have food. You know, everybody should have some decent place to live and all that. That's the attitude of the moon. It's socially responsible. And if there is a sense of social responsibility, then we get a genuine satisfaction. You know, it's like volunteering. They don't give you any money when you go home, but you feel fantastic often. You might be a little tired, but there's a very genuine sense of satisfaction. So this is how the sun and the moon give satisfaction. And Jupiter, of course, is the planet of giving. And it gives not expecting anything. You know, if it makes a contribution, it's not asking for its name to be put up on a signboard or something. It's just giving because there's a need, you see. So this is what gives satisfaction through Jupiter. So these are the 3 sources of satisfaction. And that alone is enough to make us feel good. If we feel good, why should we be feeling lonely or miserable? Then there's Rahu. Rahu is the planet that destroys sattva. It comes along and it creates doubts. It says, why are you giving this thing? You should ask for something back. It raises these thoughts in the mind, you know. Why feed this person? They don't deserve it, or some such nonsense. So this is how Rahu functions. And after Rahu comes the Rajas planets, Mercury and Venus. These are the 2 guys who hang the carrot in front of your head and make you run around giving you nothing. Because Mercury is money and Venus is, you know, so-called love. And it's, you know, it sort of keeps promising and promising, you know, not really love. It's more about, you know, the comforts of life and you know, if we had just a bigger car or a fancier house or something, we would feel happy, but it never works. You know, there's a few minutes of satisfaction when you get the bigger car, and then after that, what? It's just the same thing, really. Then there's Ketu. Ketu destroys Rajas. So if Ketu is associated with Mercury or Venus, it tends to break them, which has its negative side and also to some extent a positive side. And then, of course, there's Saturn and Mars, which are the tamas. So tamas is not all bad. Tamas is dullness, but we sleep every night. That's tamas. Sleeping is necessary. Only we should be able to stay conscious while we're sleeping. This is one of the signs of serious spiritual progress. So the body needs to have that level of tamas, we could say, but at least on the level of consciousness, there should be some light remaining, you see. And then not everybody, but a lot of people are afraid of dying. Dying is another kind of tamas, but it's also a liberation because whatever physical ailments and things we're suffering from disappear because we're moving into another dimension where there's no physicality. But there is a psychology of it. There is a mental experience after you die that goes on and on and on. I mean, it's thousands of years it could be. And that is largely influenced by our state of mental health when we die. If we die joyous, surely not only will joy will multiply after we die. This is what the yogis tell us. If we die miserable, the misery multiplies. This is where the concept of heaven and hell comes from. There's no real heaven and hell. It's just that whatever state we're in when we die tends to multiply and persist until we get reborn, and that could happen quickly or slowly or very slowly. It depends on many factors. But those who practice meditation, according to the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna explains that those who practice meditation are not wasting their time, even if they die before they gain full enlightenment, because they'll either be reborn, they may go to a high level, one of these higher lokas, which is, a very high state of bliss, and stay there for a long time. And when they get reborn, they'll be born into a fortunate family. And if they're very lucky, they'll be born into the family of yogis. So if you're a regular meditator and you have kids, there's a good chance that the kids will be quite highly evolved. It's a very big blessing. So this is another quote from the Gita, and this is chapter 18. It says, Sattva seems like poison at first, but tastes like nectar at the end. And Raja seems like nectar at the beginning, but proves poison later. So this is the absolute key point, which is that the shortcut looks good, but proves poisonous. Well, if you do something like regular spiritual practices, it may look a little bit tedious at the beginning, but the long run is fantastic benefit. So that's the thing. I mentioned on this slide death because it is the only thing that's inevitable in life. Everything else may or may not happen to us, but one thing for sure, life is short and we're going to die. So it's very important that we're ready for it. It's worth investing time now, because anyway, we don't know how long we're going to live. Even astrologers, they can sometimes come up with good guesses, but nobody for sure knows exactly. So let's have a look at some charts. And, I headed this malefics and kendras. That's one aspect that's very difficult to handle. Then challenges the moon and the sun. So the lagna, the sun, and the moon, these are the three principal things we have to consider. And what we experience, what we're born with a certain package. It's called the prarabdha karma. And the prarabdha karma is kind of extracted from the big heap of karma that we have called the sanchita. But it isn't separated from it. So when you're, going through life, you're experiencing the effects of the prarabdha karma, which gives the main structure of our life. This is why astrology works, because the prarabdha karma is mapped out in the birth chart. So we can see that at a certain time, this kind of trouble is likely to come. because that karma is fructifying. And there's no harm really because we created that and now we're just going to experience it. But it's not pleasant, of course. Um, but the sanchita karma is not so much these experiences, it's more a general feeling. If there's a lot of heavy sanchita karma, it kind of feels, it kind of weighs on us. There's a sort of weight that we're carrying. So you notice some people really seem to be carrying a heavy load, and it's not obvious why sometimes. So this is the sanchita. That can also be helped by the right spiritual practices. If you have a good guru, they'll be working on helping you shed the sanchita. You can't really fix the prarabdha. You can fix how you handle it and how you react to it. But the sanchita can be diminished and worn away, and that is very beneficial. So we can see that the karma, there's a certain karma we're carrying, and that is our playground. Or from another perspective, that is our prison. It is the framework in which we're kind of trapped. Maybe nice trap, maybe not so nice, whatever it is. And there is an escape route. Okay, we just don't know where it is. The guru knows where it is, but we don't know. So it's not impossible, but we don't need to try and to escape. We should just at least do the best with what we've got. So this is a lady, Virginia Woolf, famous British author, and she wrote some very much, she got a lot of credit for her work. But she also famously committed suicide. She got to 59, and then it was just too much. I think she'd suffered a lot in her life. So we're just looking at the Rashi chart here. And what we see is the ascendant has Ketu. Now, just because you're born with the ascendant and Ketu, that does not mean that you have to have a miserable life. In this case, we have only two malefics in the Kendras, the Lagna. So it's a bit of a problem. I mean, if you have three malefics in Kendras, the Lagna, you will face quite a lot of challenges in life, that's for sure. But Ketu rising, there will be positive things that come out of it. It can make you famous. Fame sounds good until you get it. And when you get it, you sometimes wish you didn't have it, right? But another problem that's very clear in this chart is the moon and Saturn. So the moon is really our feelings and emotions. And the moon is very much influenced by the planets it's with. And unfortunately, in this chart, Saturn is much closer to the moon than Jupiter. Jupiter is quite far away from the moon. Saturn's between the moon and Jupiter. Now, this lady got a really good husband, according to her. She had fantastic appreciation for her husband. And when she committed suicide, she wrote a note saying, "This isn't your fault. You've been the best possible husband," and all this. So Jupiter is the husband in a woman's chart. And so we see both in this Rashi chart and in the Vamsha chart, Jupiter is there trying to help the moon. But the Saturn is more influential because it's closer. I think I have the Navamsha chart. So this is the Navamsha chart. In my software, you can put all the Vargas along the top and just click on them. It's very convenient. So here we see there's a Sun-Moon conjunction in Navamsha. That's a kind of eclipse. So that's actually not an easy thing to cope with. And then that's in Aries, so it's aspected. Mars is the dispositor, and Mars is in Scorpio with Jupiter and Rahu, which is also aspecting, Rashi aspecting Aries. And, Jupiter's there with Rahu and Mars. Jupiter's trying to help, as I said. But Rahu is it tends to cut life short in Scorpio. So Rahu is kind of pressing her to throw in the towel. And it's difficult. It's also the sixth house in the Navamsha chart. So you see that beautiful exalted Venus in the 10th house. I mean, she was very talented. Saturn and Mercury in Leo in the third house shows capacity for writing and things like that. Venus is the Lord of the fifth. This would, you can see very clearly that she could be a famous author, but the psychology, the suffering is considerable. This is a lady. She was a actress. She did pretty well. She got quite a lot of awards, and she she suffered also. I mean, she was it only came out when she wrote her memoir later in her life that the first 31 years of her life she was, quote, insane. She described herself as being insane. Now, in this chart, the Shodsatari dasha applies. When you click on a dasha box in Shri Jyoti Star, it comes up with a screen which tells you which dashas apply according to Parashara's rules. And you see Shodsatari dasha, and you put it up, and you see Ketu until she's 15, and Moon until she's 31. And when we look at it, you see, the reason why I put this circular chart up, it's a North Indian chart with a circle drawn on top of it. And the reason for this is because you can see very exactly where the cusps of the houses are. You see, this is the 12th house cusp. I don't know if you can see my cursor here. And the moon is almost exactly on the 12th house cusp. And it's also on the boundary point of these two nakshatras. But the main point is the 12th house cusp. If a planet's exactly on the 12th house cusp, it has a much stronger 12th house effect than if it's somewhere else in the 12th house. So when the moon is sitting there, it's definitely a bit challenging. And this is in Leo, and the sun is in Taurus. Now, it's the ninth house. Of course, the sun represents the father, and the ninth house represents the father. And you see the sun here this is the dividing point between the eighth house and the ninth house. So the sun is a kind of weak position. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, she said the reason why she suffered so much in her first 31 years was due to abuse from her father. I mean, I don't know how it managed to last until she's well into her adulthood, but this is what she said. And there we go, you see. And then Ketu is very tight with Jupiter. See, this Ketu-Jupiter conjunction here is extremely tight. So these two planets, for these obvious and some other reasons, were causing these various kinds of suffering. Now, in 2022, she took a Mini Cooper out for a drive. She managed to crash it twice. The first crash, she survived. The second, and I presume the car crash survived. So she managed to crash it again. This time she didn't survive. So she killed herself. It's a very sad thing. She was 53. And this you can also see in the chart. If you see the Navamsha chart, let's see how it is. I don't think we need to really get into it, but there's a Moon-Mars conjunction, and Mars is aspecting Venus in the 8th house. And this was during the Venus Dasha. In fact, it was in Venus-Mars that she had this accident and died. So anyway, I mean, in between, she did good. She had various challenges, but she also did good. So this is about relocation. I thought this was quite an interesting one. Now, the fact of the matter is that if you're born with malefics in the lagna, or just in the kendras, but primarily in the lagna, there's a strong tendency to move. We don't know why we want to move, but something inside of us wants to move. Now, this guy is quite interesting. This guy, Roger Bonish, French guy. He was born before the war, the Second World War. Well, what happened was that he was doing some odd jobs after the Germans had taken over, but then they threatened to send him to a forced labor camp if he didn't join up with the security police. So he joined the security police, and he was given the job of searching for the resistance. But he actually used that position to help many of the resistance escape. Then after the war, he quit just at the end of the war. But then after the war, the French government asked him to join the security police again, and he became quite a distinguished detective. And he wrote a book about his experiences, which got turned into a movie. And I don't know, it doesn't say in the records that Wikipedia and all that, but probably when the movie was being made or something, he moved to California and he stayed there. He pretty much stayed there. He died in France, but he, you can see that he had some preference. So this is his chart in France. And actually, if you look at it, you've got Rahu in Scorpio. That is a bit challenging, really. And then you've got Mars and Mercury with Sun and Ketu in the seventh house. Now, Mars and Mercury should not really be in the seventh house. It's a bit dangerous. So this chart is generally a bit dangerous. And let's face it, being a detective and working for the Germans and cheating on them, I mean, this is all very dangerous stuff. I mean, he survived. He captured one of the most famous mafioso. Somehow he managed to survive all these things. But if you look at it, he's got Venus in the ninth house in Cancer. It's fantastic. Luck. Very lucky guy. And he's got the Gajikeshari yoga as well. So this is his chart let's see, what is this? This is his California chart. It doesn't say California there, but this is relocated to California. And what you see is it rotates the chart. He now has Saturn. It's pretty far from the ascendant. It's not really in the first house. And you have Rahu in Scorpio in the fourth. But look, Mercury and Mars have moved into a more favorable position. There's no Marana Karakastana. The Sun and Mars and Ketu are all giving tremendous Digvala, directional strength. So this is probably associated with him getting movie made about his life and becoming quite famous. So, I mean, the point here is also Jupiter has moved from the 8th house to the 11th house, and Venus does well in the 12th house. So it's actually, and you see the moon and Venus either side of the Lagna, is a better chart. It's a better chart in many ways. So for some people, moving is improving their general happiness and well-being. For some people, it gives a boost to their career. But generally, if it doesn't boost the well-being, people don't stay there. This is what I've experienced. I've done a tremendous amount of this work over the years. And people are motivated by their general well-being. They're not really, if you tell them you can have the world's best relationship if you move to this country, they don't move. If you tell you can have a fantastic job, you go here, they don't move. But for the sake of feeling better, yes, they can move, even if they have to sacrifice something else. This is a lady, Connie Francis. She was a very successful singer. People who were alive last century, might have heard of her. And this is her birth chart. She lived mainly on the east coast of the United States. You see, we have Rahu, Sun, Mars, and Ketu. They're all in the Kendras. And she had a rough time. She was one of the most successful female singers of all time, which sounds good, but she had 4 failed marriages. I think after the last one, she had a psychological breakdown. I mean, she could have recovered. Then she was raped. I mean, terrible things happened to her. It was really pretty bad. And, maybe if she'd moved to some place where she could have got away from these things. but she did come to London. And when she was in London, she made an album. And this was her number one album. She never made a better album. So let's have a look at her chart in London. So this is London. And things are improved a lot, really. You see, we've only got Saturn in the ascendant. There's two we could call benefics in the Kendras. Jupiter is, okay, she's got this problem of Jupiter debilitated, but it's much better in the 11th house and the Mercury in the 10th. It's a much better chart, I have to admit it. I mean, this is my point. She was, when she'd have a sort of top 10 or top 50 in the United States, she'd have number one in the UK. She was consistently getting number ones in the UK. So you can see this is how it works. Now, this is the chart of Pandit Sanjay Raut. And this is not a question of any mental health problem he doesn't have. But I thought, let's see about understanding the importance of the Navamsha chart, because, it's all very well, like in Western astrology, they print out a map with certain lines on it and they make, but, there's a much more to it than that. Because in the United States, if you go from coast to coast, it's many thousands of miles, and the ascendant will change twice or three times. Sometimes it's only twice. Usually it's three times. So those ascendants cover, a big range, and just because you're on some line or not is, it's important, but the Navamsha is very critical. You can move from one side of a city to another and your whole life changes because the Navamsha changed. So Sanjay was born in Orissa, which is right on the east side, just south of Calcutta. And he was there, he grew up there. Then he moved, he was studied in Chennai, and then he went to Delhi and he stayed in Delhi ever since. So what happens? He prefers Delhi to Orissa, I'm told, by his wife. So what is at least it's keeping him there. So why is that, you see? So if we look at it on the Navamsha level, this is the chart in Orissa. So you see it's quite intense. You've got the Rahu, Ketu and Mars axis, the 1-7 axis. And definitely he suffered from this, there's no doubt about that. But if he moves to Delhi, as he did, you see what happens? This is Navamsha rotated. And instead of the nodes on the 1-7 axis, he's now got Mercury and Jupiter. So no wonder he stayed in Delhi, you see. So I guess my point is that, obviously the best thing you can do for yourself is asanas, meditation, spiritual practices, whatever thing you follow. But this is also consideration. If you have a lot of malefic energy in the Kendras, maybe go somewhere else, which rotates the chart at least enough. At least the Navamsha should be nice, as nice as possible. Okay, good. So perspective. I think this is of value, because if we get some perspective on our lives, then it just changes our consciousness, because everything that we experience is going on inside here. It's all going on inside here. We think it's all happening out there, but we only see things inside here. We only experience things inside here. It's all to do with the chemistry that's going on in our brains and our nervous systems. So there's a tendency for our lives to get out of proportion, There is a saying that if you think you're big, you're very small. And if you realize you're very small, you become profound. So what the yogis say. So I thought, let's look at, let's look at the actual reality of our lives. So this is the little area of space in which we live. When I say little, it's little as with respect to the universe. The universe is big, and this is just a little bit of it, very tiny. This here, which is called Laniakea, we called it Laniakea, is a group of hundreds of thousands of galaxies which are somehow connected. They're all moving in a coordinated way according to a certain gravitational pull. They're moving away from what's called the dipole repeller towards this Shapley supercluster. And our Milky Way is in here. So this, from our perspective, is extraordinarily vast. But from a point of view of the universe, it's just a little bit, right? So if we zoom in, this is our particular sub area of the out of all that big, what big, out of that little bit is this, which is called the Virgo supercluster, mainly called the Virgo supercluster. So this is that. And here you see this, it says local group. So this is the, we're living in what's called the local group. And the local group is presumably probably the pixel here, 1 pixel. Okay. And if we zoom in on that, this is the local group. So here's the Milky Way, and here's Andromeda. Andromeda's a little bit bigger than the Milky Way. And then these two are surrounded by a large number of smaller galaxies. So already there's 20 or 30 galaxies in the local group. And then somewhere in the Milky Way, which is this little area here, there's the solar system, which is, of course, far too small to appear as a pixel. And then inside the solar system, there's the Earth, which is just a dot, right? And on the Earth, there's us. So if people have, in the ancient days, you go outside in the evening and it was all dark. And you look up and you see the skies, and it would be a cause of wonder, right? Because when you see the vastness of it all, something inside of you functions correctly. It's like there's some kind of joy, and there's some kind of humbleness. Humbleness and joy are very closely linked. You can't have one without the other, really. And it's just sanity drawn. But if we never really consider this perspective, we become quite insane, thinking we're some big person, we have something special, and all these things. And as the yogis say, when you start thinking you're big, you become very small. And a pain for everybody else, to be honest. So this is the perspective I wanted to give. So what I feel is happening right now, because we've reached a very intense phase of our existence. We've got this incredible civilization with extraordinary levels of comfort and convenience. The comfort and convenience we enjoy is unprecedented. Never in human history has any such thing ever been there. I mean, you just only have to go back to when I was a kid. There was nothing like what we've got now. It's just, we shouldn't take it all for granted. But the difficulty is that all of the things we're doing to get the comfort and convenience is also polluting and destroying the ecosystem which we need to survive. And there's enormous amount of denial about it. There's tremendous efforts to stop us doing anything to save ourselves, because we're being driven towards extinction. So I feel we're on a kind of crossroads. That's the point of this. With great effort, I managed to get the AI to produce this image. And really, there's business as usual, which means we do nothing. We just keep doing what we're doing. And then we're heading down this path towards darkness. We are going to go, perhaps not extinct, but there'll be a fantastic decline in the population. And it'll be simply something different. Eventually we'll recover, but things will have to be different in the future. Just because we refuse to make any changes now, or we, at least a reasonable percentage of the human population, become a bit more conscious. That's all it needs. Because if we were a little bit more conscious, we'd be less destructive. We'd be paying more attention to, innumerable sources of pollution that we're generating. And so that's the path into the light. So this is our choice, really. AI is not the solution. AI can be quite useful, but it's not going to be conscious. Not the current AI. It's not got the capacity for consciousness, even if it has a degree of self-awareness, according to some definition. So, if you don't have anything in your life, spiritually organized, there's a very nice app on the app stores called Miracle of Mind. The best thing really is to find a really genuinely good, great guru. So anyway, this is my small presentation. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, we can do those now.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And I really appreciate your talk and the topic you have chosen for today. It does resonate with me very, very much. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
There is a question. How do we make the chart for a new place? Nadia.
Yeah. Let me show you that. So we'll just...
Andrew, is that similar to astrocartography?
Let me show you how it works. Okay, so this is the chart of Prince Harry. I thought it might be interesting to look at his chart in England and California, because it's just an example of relocation, isn't it? So if we consider, now, the reason why I'm using the circular chart is because when you relocate a chart, it rotates it. It literally rotates. And as I say, small changes actually make a difference. And it's very important to see that the house cusps, all the house cusps, not just the cardinal positions. Anyway, if we look at this chart, yeah, Sagittarius rising with Jupiter, Venus is in the 10th house, Sun and Mercury in the 9th, Saturn exalted in the... It's a pretty great chart, isn't it? It's got definitely some good points. But he was kind of forced to move. I don't think he volunteered to move. He was kind of forced to move. After all, when you marry someone from California, sooner or later you're going to end up there, isn't it? So what we do is, there's relocation here, time-space change. So we do relocation, and it puts up a map.
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's great. All right, so you can zoom out. This is the planet. So you can see these lines are the cardinal lines. You don't really need all the other lines. These are the ones that are particularly useful because the Kendras, these are the Kendras, the cardinal lines, and they show us the main impacts because they're impacting the Lagna. And they stay where they are. What happens when you relocate a chart is effectively moving the Lagna. So the impact changes. And what happens is that as you move, you can up in the software. I'm going to make this a little smaller. I'm going to make this close that and make this a bit bigger. So I'll put up the map. So in order to make life easy, because I do a lot of this work, so I've designed this to make it really easy to do this kind of work. And it has features which you don't find, I think, in any other software, including the ability to relocate two charts at once. Like you could relocate Prince Harry and Meghan with one click. And then you can have charts of both people on the screen. Like the circle chart, you can make it you put the two people on the same chart. Or you can have two charts, whatever, like that. But anyway, we're not going to do Meghan, we're going to do Harry. So one of the cool things is that you hold down the shift key on the keyboard. And then as you move the cursor, the circle updates. So this is like the East Coast of the United States. Let me just, and this is California. You can enter a particular place, or you can just click on the map. But scanning across the globe is very convenient. You just hold it on the shift key and move the mouse. This is I'll try and do these. All right. Okay, so he has Venus rising in Virgo. This is the positive thing. But generally speaking, it's not so great because the moon has gone in the 8th house and sun has gone to the 12th house. And the Mercury, the Lord of the 10th, has gone to the 12th house. So from a point of view of his career, his status in society, it's definitely gone down. I mean, you could say, isn't it?
So, Andrew, 1 minute, Andrew. So it is astrocartography then.
It's Vedic version of astrocartography.
Okay.
It's got the main elements of astrocartography, but instead of doing all this sort of parans and all that, what you're doing is you're looking at the Vedic chart and you can quickly see everything. You see, you can't just look at the map. You have to look at the actual chart and see all the planets,
Yeah.
but especially the moon and the sun and the.
Okay. So, so one can do that for any country basically. And this is in your latest version, yes?
Yeah, version 9 had it also.
Yeah, okay.
It's just that version 10 is a little bit tweaked, but this is essentially the same.
Okay.
And it's fantastic. It works just like a joy, Like I had a client a couple of days ago, and in all of the US, except for the East Coast, was not really, you could see that she was struggling. And she hadn't been to the East Coast. And she said, "Where in the US should I go?" She didn't give me any clues. So I looked over it and I said, "Oh, you should try moving to Florida." And she said, "Oh, thank you, thank you. I've been there on holiday. It's fantastic." I mean, she'd lived there for a few months. And firstly, I told her what would happen in Florida. Then she said, "Yeah, this is exactly what happened." So people just do experience exactly the experience. So it's a very profound part of the whole science. But we're taking a Vedic view, it does the job.
Yeah.
So it is with the same date of birth, and
Yeah.
we are just changing the place.
You see, the thing is, you're keeping the exact moment of birth the same, but you're moving the place. So if you just change the place in the data entry, it wouldn't work. It's a bit tricky because you've got to keep the moment the same, even though you've moved the place. So if you try and do it manually, you'll usually get it wrong. So that's the advantage of the software because it's doing it for you internally. It saves your life,
It is very interesting that we were not born in another place. We were born in the definite place where we were. And then how is it explained? I mean, it is not like the Titi Pravesh where we change with the time as well.
There's two things. There's time and space. Time and space.
Yeah.
They're both there. See, the word Kala in Sanskrit means both time and space. They didn't distinguish because they understood, like Einstein, space-time, right? So they're just two dimensions or different dimensions of the same experience. So when you move somewhere, it has some effect similar to the changing of the time. But the fact is that if you have strong malefics in the Kendras, if you don't move, you're kind of stuck. It's like you're living a nightmare in a sense. And so that's why most people who have malefics strongly influencing the Kendras will move. But you see, like in Sanjay Rath's chart, he has this fantastic Jupiter in Pisces, so he's not going to leave India because, you know, that's the key thing. That's the why he's so great. But he has to suffer from these malefics. So it just at least rotated the Navamsha chart so it became nice and supportive, you know, instead of a torture. So it's that's the thing, you see. It's a fantastic tool. You know, it's not a substitute for spiritual practices, but it can at least get us out of a rut. But we should be careful what we're doing because I've had people, clients, who've been told to move by some astrologer, and it was a disaster because the astrologer didn't know what they were doing. They didn't really study the chart completely, you see. If you throw somebody's moon into the 8th house, how is that going to make them happy? You know, you may put them on the Jupiter line, but there'll be, you know, there can be negative effects from other factors. You need to see the whole chart. You need all the tools of Vedic astrology, along with the relocations system. And it just works brilliantly.
Super.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I think Oksana, are we up now?
Yes, but there is one more question in the box. Yes, the question is, can I use any ACG software for a Vedic Rashi chart so far, for example?
You probably can. I mean, mine just has some unique features which makes it a lot easier. But it might be possible to do it with a little bit more effort in some other software. The version 10 is available with a free trial, so you can just try it out for free.
Oh, that's good to know.
We haven't
I
forgotten.
mean, I use predominantly Shri Jyoti Star, I have to say. I can't get my head around others.
I
So,
agree.
yeah. So, anyway,
Thanks a
okay,
lot, Sana and Oksana.
yeah. Thank you for
And
being
thank you very much.